Yes.
Yeah. How
So
you doing, Mark? Are you good?
very good, very good, very good indeed. Uh,
Cool.
so I have a lot of questions for you. So absolute pleasure to be talking to the legendary Andrew Farriss. So thanks very much for taking the time out. Let's get stuck in. You released your Love Makes the World EP on October 2nd in the country music genre. So why did an Australian rock star decide to put out music in that genre?
Right. It didn't start out that way. My wife's American. I'm obviously an Aussie, although I spent 5 years living in England and two of my kids were born in the UK. And I've always been a songwriter, and I started to go from Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, where my wife's family are, to drive from Dayton about 5.5 hours to Nashville. And I started to meet guys and girls there and work with them. And I didn't think I was making country music at first. I was just writing songs, as you do. And I met some amazingly talented people, older people, younger people. But my journey was really as a songwriter. I think where it really kicked in for me was I started writing horses along the Mexican border, or the US border with Mexico, with my wife, and near the Chiricahua Mountains are. And I got an education by an old cowboy guy called Craig Lawson, and his wife Tam would take my wife and I started to recognize that I was doing something interesting. And I started to learn about the history of that area down along Mexican border where Arizona and New Mexico meet. And we rode horses all through that area. And what happened was I learned about the Apache Indians, the Mexican army, Mexican people, the US cavalry. Tombstone was just up the road from where we were riding around. And so you have the cowboys amongst all this history, and especially the Apache Indians, where Geronimo surrendered, Cochise had his stronghold. What I'm trying to say is, when I went back to Nashville after I did that, and I recognized from my own career as a songwriter, especially with INXS and the area you work in, with trying to always come up with a sort of a chart hit with something you're working on. I recognized, wait a minute, whatever it was I was just doing has nothing to do with that. And I started talking to the songwriters I was working with in Nashville, and they're like, yeah, but that's not what we do now. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I want to write songs about the Old West. I'd like to write songs about what life was like for the people in the later part of the 19th century, which is where it all started, I think, with country music in America. And I began to recognize that and I went back again and went back to the people who had been kind enough to let me explore these areas. And then I recognized that I was learning about culture. I'm not learning so much about pop history or pop charts or whatever, but I'm having a real life experience with understanding a culture. And it's not Hollywood, it's real, it's gritty, some of it's very unpleasant, some of it's very awkward. But then I used to say to the writers who are back in Nashville, I really want to write about that era,
Why is it taking you so long to put out music as Andrew Farriss? I mean, INXS hasn't been doing anything for a long time. Did you have a lot of songs, written?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. That's true. Mark, I had a lot of material and I didn't really know what to do with it. I took some of it to the band, but some of them were like, hey, Andrew, have you lost your mind? In a nice way, because I love my brothers. I love Gary, I love Kirk. But I think I don't think they were really sure where I was heading with it all. And I said, well, I just don't want to I don't want to recreate the things we've already achieved. What we've already done was amazing together, and I love it, what we've done. But this is not what I'm trying to do. So a lot of the songs that I've had sort of stored up in the background, you know, especially since INXS stopped touring in 2012, a lot of what I've been doing is just sort of exploring cultures, both not just in the United States, but also Australian culture. The combination, I hear an Irish lilt in your accent there, with Irish instruments coming into cultures like Australia and the United States, bringing classical instruments, which went from being a violin into a fiddle, the mishmash of guitars with drums like a banjo, and all these sort of instruments, I began to recognize was a challenge to me to work out how to start to write my songs that would be able to be played by anybody with these sort of instruments. And so that, you know, I'd be able to sit around like I have a mandola now, you know, which is tuned a fifth lower than a mandolin. And I like sitting there sometimes and just playing my mandola, you know, because I like those instruments and the old school pianos, you know, nylon string guitars and things like that. And it's also because I worked a lot with synthesizers and technology and, you know, computers and things, where I was always trying to, you know, chase the train with what the new trend was. And I went, well, why am I doing that? I'm really a songwriter. You know, so if anyone can pick up one of these old school instruments and play one of the songs I'm working on, that's great, you know.
Well, one of the first songs we've heard from the EP is All the Stars Are Mine. Brilliant track. Really, really, really enjoy it. Why did you decide to put that track out first as a taster for the EP?
Actually, I wish I could say that was my idea, but it wasn't. I'd actually, yeah, it was a label, yeah. And what happened was, I'd actually started to release my LP, which is now going to come out on March 19th. I have an official date now, right. But I had 2 songs I released, which were, I call my cowboy songs, you know, and I was shooting cowboy videos. And where I was actually riding horses too, which you haven't seen that yet, but that'll happen later. And don't laugh, I can actually stay on the horse. Right?
So that's in the video?
Yeah, but for a few minutes anyway. But, you know, but seriously, so I started to release songs from my LP, and then I realized that we have this COVID, awful virus thing running around the world. So the American record company, BBR, and BMG, for the rest of the world, said, hey, Andrew, what are you doing? And I said, well, I want to put this music out. They said, well, mate, you know, honestly, I don't know if that's a really good idea, because, you know, a lot of our people are gone home, you know. There's no one to really promote your record. And at first I thought, oh, they're just saying that, well, give me the flick, you know, get rid of me. And then I thought, you know what, they're right. I don't know what's going to happen either. It's scary, this virus thing. And it's not finished yet either, as we're talking. But anyway, so, you know, so and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And then I had, luckily, a few more tracks I'd recorded that were actually going to come out after my LP. And I'd done some artwork for it and photographs or whatever. I had an idea what I was going to follow up my LP with. Well, I took that idea to the label, to BMG, and they said, we'd love to do that. And I went, oh, I was surprised, you know. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm putting out the EP. There's 5 tracks on it. And that's where All the Stars of Mine was sort of born, was the label said, we really like this song. And I was a little bit surprised because I thought it's a bit of a dark horse, that song. It's not a normal pop song at all, actually.
I've heard the EP and it's really great. And one of the standout tracks for me as well is the track My Brother. Now, Is that song about Michael?
Well, I'll pay respect to my co-writer, John Stevens, his brother, and I would rather he talked about this, but
Right.
his brother passed away, from a similar sort of tragedy to Michael. So it's not my place to discuss that
Right.
aspect. You should ask John,
Yeah.
But yes, on my side of the songwriting of that song, we coined the lyric, and I think it was something that we felt a certain brotherhood about, John and I, and we sat there and we went, only someone that's been close to something like that in their lives can fully get how to write a lyric like that, because it's not a pop lyric, No.
No, it's a really, really good song, and it just sort of stuck out straight away. I thought it would be, about I didn't even realize you'd written it with John.
Yeah.
The last track, First Man on Earth, real amazing track. It wouldn't be out of place on an INXS album.
I co-wrote that with Guy Chambers, and I knew people were going to pick up on that song. I just knew it. Anyway, it's different than the country rock folk thing I've been doing. But the reason that I thought it related to the EP was, at the moment, I think the whole world, in my opinion, is going through something we haven't seen for 100 years, since Spanish flu, right? So the whole world has that in common, even though we're not talking about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a commonness to that that's unusual, because normally around the world, it's, this country's doing that, or this country's doing this, but we're all experiencing something together. So I thought Love Makes the World being my EP, with songs like the titles of My Brother, All the Stars Are Mine, which is about embracing people from other countries and recognizing that we're not that different than each other, really. I mean, you might say we are, we sort of are, but we're not really. We're all human beings, regardless of race, color, creed, and we all got to get along, and we're all vulnerable to this awful virus thing. So, All the Stars Are Mine is, we're all sort of refugees from something, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're all escaping, whether it's from a virus or whatever, some awful thing in the background of your life or whatever it is. And then I thought, and all of this tied into this idea of the earth, and it was my wife, Marlena, who said, well, what about First Man on Earth? And I thought, that's a real wild card, that one. That's because she'd heard the song. And Guy and I never knew what to do with it. We were like, we like this, but who the hell's going to want to listen to a song that's 8 minutes and 8 seconds long, right?
It's a brilliant track, and it finishes the EP off really, really well.
Cool. Well, that's what Guy and I thought was, what are we going to do with this thing? So I asked him, are you okay with this? He said, yeah. And Marlena, my wife, said, well, you got to put it on the EP, and the record label liked the idea. So here we are.
No, that's great. How are you adjusting to being a solo artist? Are you comfortable being the main focus of attention?
So far, so good, Mark.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of what Michael went through with INXS and all the rest of it. And he had some very interesting friends, a lot of people you would know, probably talk to, that sort of thing. And then I sort of recognized before I went to do this, I did say to my wife and other people close to me, I said, look, if I embark on this thing, the idea is I want to enjoy myself. I know that sounds very selfish, but my whole thinking with it is that I've already had a huge ride and a huge career with INXS, and I simply want to do this because I feel, as a songwriter, I haven't quite finished yet, and I feel I have some things that hopefully some people will like if I share with them, and that along the way, if it's unpleasant, unenjoyable, I won't do it anymore.
Do you plan to, once everything gets back to normal, do you plan to get out on the road and play some live shows?
Oh, Mark, I'd love to.
Hmm.
I really would. I'd love to. I was planning to do that around mid-March. Both head over from Australia to the US and then over to Europe. I had a few ideas of things I was going to do. But of course, like most people, the COVID thing smashed so many ideas and plans or whatever. So now I've become to realize I'm just fortunate to have the people in my life close to me and that anyone's interested in my music at all.
Yeah, well, it'd be great to see you out on the road. Hopefully, you'll come to Ireland.
That'd be good.
Over the years, you've written, songs for years. You've written with Michael, and then now you're writing by yourself, and you've written with the likes of Kieran and John Stevens. Has your songwriting process changed over the years?
I think it has. I mean, I think we all, as writers and recording artists, you do change. I'm no good at replicating the same thing over and over again. I get bored with that. So I tend to always want to, try something a little bit different. Sometimes I'll take something I've really enjoyed doing and then do this something similar. But I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. It's not me.
It's 30 years since INXS released X. Did you feel pressure going into that record after the success of Kick?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think there was a lot of pressure on us. I mean, I think INXS, well, especially Michael and I, we knew as songwriters going into Kick that we had the blessing of the rest of the band members artistically, which doesn't often happen in a band. Bands are funny things. People can be very competitive and they get very upset or jealous or whatever about things. But that's not what happened with the Kick album. We had the blessing of the guys in the band. They said, would you like, we'd like you and Michael to write all the songs for Kick. So we said, sure, which is what we did. And then we had a monster of an album all around the world, and I think we were all blown away with it. Everyone in the band, me and Michael, everyone. I think we took a lot of people by surprise. I think to follow that up, we were all a bit like, well, what do you do after that? So I think for all of us, so I can only talk about it, what it was like for me. But for me, I think it wasn't just a matter of the recordings or the songwriting. It was what happens to your life when you have something huge explode in your life, whatever that is. And then we were dealing with that as opposed to, oh, okay, well, that was great. Let's go make some more music. It wasn't so much that. It was like, what the hell was that all about as far as the success of it went? And so I think when we rolled around for the next set of recordings and whatever, I remember the band guys talking about during we were promoting Kick on that long tour we did, where I think it was 14 months or something. And they were saying, well, you and Michael have written all these songs. We'd like to have a go on the next album. I sure, okay. That's what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing a lot of the songs on acoustic guitars and pianos and things. As opposed to doing a lot of the programming work I was doing on back then on drum machines or technology or loops or samples or whatever. I said, well, sure, I'll just go old school. I'll write these songs on acoustic guitar or piano or whatever, and you guys can do whatever you want with them, So when we got in the studio, Chris Thomas, the record producer, said, Andrew, where's all your demos? I said, well, here, I'll play a song for you, on acoustic guitar or piano. And it was like, no, where's all the riffs and the hooks and the recordings and everything? So I thought everyone wanted to have a go at it, And then I realized, oh, well, okay, you want what I was doing before. Okay, sure. So I went, Kirk actually from INXS helped me to get some technology together to sort of track some stuff really quickly. So I did. I put together a bunch of demos like Suicide Blonde and some other things. I said, what do you think of that? I said, it's great. We like that. But I'm okay with I can work old school or with technology or whatever. But at the moment, I'm very happy just sort of working with pianos and acoustic guitars and old school instruments like mandolas, mandolins, banjos, and whatever, acoustic guitars, and sitting around a campfire and having fun.
You mentioned Suicide Blonde, and what a way to start off an album, and also what a first single from an album. What can you tell me about the writing and recording of that track?
Well, first of all, it's going to sound like a funny thing to say because it's got nothing to do with the writing and recording of the song. I love the video of Suicide Blonde. Which is very narcissistic. But when I look back at that video, I go, yeah, all right. When I look at that thing, I was like, we look pretty good in that. Whereas some of the videos we made, we look awful in, and so, but I'll come back to your question. And I felt really that with, I think with the writing of Suicide Blonde, I think it was an important song for Michael and I to reconnect as songwriters. I think he'd gone off in a whole other spaceship to me at that point after Kick. And I don't know that we had a heck of a lot of in common, and so I think Suicide Blonde was the first song where we felt, well, okay, we can do this, again, this is really good. And then there were certain other songs on the X album for me, like Hear That Sound. My brother, John, co-wrote Disappear with Michael, great song. And we began to realize, okay. And then, I had written By My Side with Kirk in the band. And so we that album came together very, very differently than any other album, actually, that album. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is when you have a very stellar sort of success, whether it's a solo artist or you're a band or whatever, it's not so much yourselves that change, but people's perceptions of you, both, in and out of the media or even in your social or personal life, become intrusive, and they start to think that you're different than you were before, but really nothing's changed at all. You're just trying to grapple with moving on to the next thing,
And in support of that album, you played Wembley Stadium, which you just re-released actually on Blu-ray and all other formats. What I love about that, it was probably the biggest gig INXS ever played, but you spent backstage in the toilet smoking a cigarette and having a beer.
Yeah, well, it's true. The reason for that was that I got nervous backstage because there was some very, very successful other artists backstage. Well, from the other support bands like Hot House Flowers and Jesus Jones and Deborah Harry, Peter Gabriel was wandering around, and there were some very, very successful other musicians and actors and actresses wandering around backstage. And I began to get a bit nervous, thinking, look, I'm just a bloke from Australia, I got to walk out there and entertain all these people and make sure Michael sounds as good as he can, So I thought, what am I going to do with all of this? So, I took a cigarette and a beer and went in the toilet and just sat there and smoked a cigarette and drank a beer. I thought it's about the best I can contribute before I go on stage, really. But the other thing was with Wembley Stadium, the interesting thing was we played a series of concerts before that, including Rock in Rio, which I think was 150,000 people or something, and Texas Stadium we played. And our support bands there were Guns N' Roses, Iggy Pop, and Ziggy Marley. And at Rock in Rio, our support bands were Billy Idol. I'm a huge fan of Billy's, and Santana and Joe Cocker. And I remember staying there looking at Santana, and I had to play guitar in front of that guy, You know what I mean? You want to turn around and go, well, I'm just going to play over here for a minute, because he's watching what you're doing, and so stuff like that. And actually, Joe Cocker covered Never Tear Us Apart. It's one of my favorite covers of Never Tear Us Apart, actually.
All right, I've never heard that.
Yeah. Very good.
The video version of Never Tear Us Apart starts off with like a light piano, but there isn't. You can't buy it. There's no recorded version of it. You know, does it exist?
I don't think so. I mean, it was Chris Thomas, record producer, with Never Tear Us Apart. When I first played it to him, he was like, "Yeah, it's a great song, but it just doesn't have the right backing, you know." And I didn't really understand what he was talking about. So he said, "Can you try the piano part with string lines?" So I was using an emulator 2 back then, a sample keyboard. And then I found a nice sort of truncated string sound. And I started playing that exact same piano part on the strings. He goes, "That's it, right there. That's what it is." And that's his genius. Chris Thomas is a record producer, you know. Amazing.
Yeah, things really started to change for INXS once he came on board for Listen Like Thieves.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic producer. Why did you not work with him after the X album?
That's a good question. I was actually wondering that myself the other day. I don't know. Well, first of all, we worked with Mark Opitz before on Shabu Shabar, which is our first international record we released. And Mark was around, we were in Sydney and we were mates, so we decided to run with Mark Opitz on that record with Welcome to Wherever You Are. And I'm really happy with that album. It was a big success for us in the charts, but we never toured it properly, which was our fault, really. No one else's fault. But I think, yeah, there's certain albums that would have been great to have heard what Chris Thomas produced. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And after Michael's death, INXS worked with other artists like John Stevens, Terence Trent D'Arby, and you did an album with JD Fortune. But after, which was a great album, by the way. But after that, you were working with Northern Ireland's Kieran O'Gibbon, and you wrote some songs. Why did an album never develop with Kieran?
I don't know. That's a good question. All I know is I love writing with Kieran. I'd write with him anytime. Incredibly talented man, a great singer, a great performer, and we did track some recordings with Kieran, but we never released them. And so who knows, Kieran's one of the great songwriters, I think, and he's just, he has a great sense of, what's the word? He knows how to encapsulate a lyric really, really well. Like when I'm working with him, I know that when I'm working with him, that we will get to the end of it and definitely nail the subject matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a great artist. Yeah. Very good. How do you think INXS would survive in today's music climate if you were just starting out?
Oh, I don't know. Mate, I got no idea.
Different thing.
Seriously for a minute, I don't think it's very easy at the moment.
No.
Or given that, the whole world's wondering where on earth we're going with this pandemic thing. That's one thing. But then we have the technologies that are being invented at the moment. I coined a phrase the other day because one of the other businesses I've been in the last 30 years is agriculture, And I say to people, yeah, technology's great, but you can't eat an iPhone.
Correct.
Right.
Very true.
Yeah. And in 200 years' time, there'll be some other technology than what we're even talking on now. It's all very flash. What we're doing is all very clever. But in 200 years' time, I can guarantee you'll be eating food.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And drinking water.
If you're lucky. Right.
Yeah. Is there anything in the INXS vaults that could be released in the future, such as unreleased tracks?
Well, you'd have to talk to the rest of the fellas about that. I'm just one of them.
Yeah.
It might be. Yeah.
Good. It'd be great to hear. Last question. Out of all the songs that you've written, what's the one that you're most proud of?
You mean with INXS or just me?
You?
Yeah. For me personally, I suppose just like, especially for parents when your first child comes into the world, for me it'd be like either Baby Don't Cry or Beautiful Girl, because I wrote those songs on Welcome to Wherever You Are about the birth of my first child, Grace, and it just blew me away. I was like, you know, all the things I thought were so, you know, amazing in life, you know, and so important, are nothing compared to when you experience that feeling of having your own child. Yeah.
Yeah, they're two amazing songs. And well, you mentioned Baby Don't Cry. I take it you sort when you originally wrote that, it was maybe acoustic and it was a sort of, you know, bit of a slow track, and then it turned into this big overblown back with orchestras and huge video.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you should say that. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, what would be really interesting is because INXS actually recorded us as a rock band playing that song, and then we also recorded it live with the orchestra. But I actually think that's very interesting. It would be, I would really like to hear just the rock version of that song. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, with us just being a band, you know.
well, I'm sure it exists somewhere there, you know.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah, I'm sure it's there. Yeah.
We'll hear it sometime.
Yeah.
Andrew, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You know, it's a real privilege to talk to you. You know, to be honest, I'm not a country music fan, but when I listened, I thought, you know, like Andrew Farriss doing country music. I listened to the songs and I really, really enjoyed them. They're really, really great. So I'm looking forward to hearing the full album. Keep doing what you're doing. Very, very good. Really enjoy it.
All right. Stay safe, my friend.
Yeah.
Good luck to you.
You too. Thanks for your time.